I worked at a council, Manchester City Council, for nearly a decade,
God, I bet that was hell.
and it was awful. I've seen waste, I've seen competence, I've seen half the people who work in councils. You could do Elon Musk, you could sack half of the staff in any council and you would never see reduction in services.
But there's a problem there, isn't there? Because they've got various sort of like legal protections and contractual protections. So it's very difficult to actually fire council staff, as I understand it.
It can be done. I mean,
I'm sure it can be
yeah,
done. But like,
I mean,
in a private company, it's much easier. Right?
yeah, it's much easier because you've got the unions involved. But I mean, when austerity kicked in 12, 13 years ago, many councils sacked and made redundant many people. So it can be done.
Right, okay.
We've all heard about the waste in government. So I just want to talk about councils because that's where my knowledge came from. If we could, yeah, so on screen there. So I think it was 2020, the Taxpayers Alliance did some work and found over 5.5 billion of government waste in 1 year.
Just hate it.
That was the stuff they could find.
Yeah.
So that's not the total. That's all they could
Yeah,
find.
this is the tip of the iceberg.
Exactly, because most of it you'll never know about.
Just 5.5 billion.
Yeah,
Billion.
yeah. With a B. Not an M.
Remember the next time you look at your wages and you look at the tax.
Yeah.
Right. A significant percentage of that is just going to be pissed down the drain.
I'm going to give you some examples of some real examples in a minute that I was involved in.
Right.
Have you got a favourite story, an example of what you've heard previously about waste in the
Yeah, it's called the NHS.
Right.
It's called the bloody immigration. So yeah, no, there's so much that I just don't even.
The best example that I was ever told was by a friend of mine who worked in the council. He was a senior manager and he moved departments to the cutting the grass and looking after the maintenance in the parks and streets. And he got charged with, right, we need to cut our budget a little bit. So he looked at the budget and found for the last 5-6 years, this one guy was being paid overtime every Saturday, spring and summer.
Right.
And no one could explain what he was being paid overtime to do. So he looked into it. If he was being paid overtime at the peak times to cut extra grass because they needed it, sounds fine. Looked into it a bit more. He operated a machine to cut the grass and then realised this machine takes 2 people to man that machine. Who else is working with him? Found out no one. For 5 years, this guy was coming into work on a Saturday, sitting in the office watching TV, and there was no one to help him with machines, so he didn't do any work. Was he disciplined? No, because he'd emailed his boss 5 years ago twice and told him, there's no one to work this machine with me. So he told his boss, no one did anything about it. So for 5 years, he got paid overtime every Saturday.
You know, there's a constant argument made by American libertarians about governments. And one of them is they do everything really inefficiently and we'd be better off, if not without them, with them massively scaled back. And I'm just, they're constantly vindicated by that. Whenever I just, this sort of stuff really annoys me because it would just be one competent person to go and oversee it. And this whole thing would be resolved.
That's annoyed you. Let me give you some examples that I've been involved in. So that was hearsay, that story. We don't know the nuance of it. We don't know the...
But you know.
Let me tell you the examples I've been involved in with nuance, and I can tell you, you can ask me questions about them as well. So let's talk about the case of the expensive picture frame. So 15, 16, 17 years ago, I was a youth intervention officer in East Manchester. My job was to intervene early in young people's lives before the police started arresting them.
Yeah.
So basically, short, sharp shock, speak to the parents. This won't go on. A telling off, basically, usually sat in police stations. And we had, one of my main targets was this kid, let's call him Pete. Dysfunctional family, dysfunctional kid, a white version of Mizzy, causing havoc in his neighbourhood.
Right.
Just antisocial behaviour every day. And we were dealing with him. And then I came into work one day and someone said, Pete was with the police, like, oh, what's he done now? No, it's good news. At 15 years old, 11 o'clock last night, he found a 3-year-old wandering the streets where he lived. So took him by the hand, went to a phone box, because no one had mobile phones those days. Phone 999, police turned up, picked this 3-year-old kid up. This 3-year-old kid had escaped out of a kitchen, didn't lock the door, wandering the streets, 11 o'clock at night, 3 years old. So I thought, what a great guy. So I designed a Citizens Award on the computer, nice little cheap certificate, and thought, I want to put this in a frame.
Bit of clip art.
Exactly. go to his, give it to him. So carrot and stick, we're always giving him the stick. Let's do some carrot here because he did something good for his community. Let's reward that, and that might instill something in him. I went to the office reception. The manager said, I'm going to buy a picture frame to put this certificate in. They're £1 in a pound shop.
Yeah.
You don't do petty cash here. I'll have to order you one. Okay, ordered me one. Printed out the receipt on a computer. It'll be here tomorrow. There you go, $15.99. I said, they're £1 in the shop. She goes, we don't do petty cash. $15.99. Turned up next day. It was exactly the same as the one in the shop for £1.
Of course it was.
So put it in there. Knocked on his door, spoke to his mum, and she looked at me and went, what's he done now? I'm sick of it. I went, no. Good news today. This is what he's done. And she was proud. And she was part of the problem, but she was proud. She went, finally, one of my sons has done something good and I'm being praised. And she called him from downstairs. He came downstairs, saw my face and went, wasn't me. And I went,
no, this time it wasn't. It's okay.
Yeah. He didn't know what he'd done. So I told him. His mum disappeared, came back with a hammer and nail, and she hung it on above the fireplace. And she said, it's the first thing anyone's ever praised any of my kids for. So that was sort of work I did, but a £1 picture frame cost $15.99 through the council's purchasing system.
Yeah. I mean, it's a small example, but if everything is 15 times more expensive than it should be, you can see how this problem scales up.
Yep. And the reason why we don't have petty cash is because the council would rather pay more for things than ever to have fraud.
It's not their money, is it?
Because it's not their money. Fraud gets in the papers and there's big trouble. So let's all go through these systems where we pay more. No bad press for fraud. That's why we have that system.
It's not like they're operating on a market economy anyway. Okay, there's trouble in the media. Okay, so what? You know, we're still going to pay our council tax.
Their budgets still get approved and get passed every year. If we have the next picture, let me talk about the case of the weak magnet. Now, I sound a bit like Agatha Christie here. I've got all these cases we're going through. Now, after I left that job of being a youth intervention officer, I got a job looking at crime and disorder across the whole of the city of Manchester. How can we reduce crime, antisocial behaviour, and how can we make people less fearful of crime? Because crime was going down, but people still felt as if crime was high. There's always a disconnect between what people think and the actual figures, and it's still the case now. So we got some money, or we got a load of money actually off the Home Office, and it was called funny money. So whenever you got extra budget and you didn't know where it came from, the term in the council was funny money.
Right.
That's how we treated taxpayers' money. It was funny money. And part of my job then was to look at
just maintain my calm.
new inventive ways.
I have to pay so much tax.
New inventive ways of how are we going to achieve some of these goals. So instead of just doing the normal things, let's be creative. Let's see what else we can do. We've got this money to see what these things work. We got some lip balms made up that had the domestic violence telephone number as a barcode on it. Right. So an evil husband wouldn't know you had the domestic violence phone number.
Right.
We gave away bike locks, and we gave away rape alarms and paid staff overtime. All these things. Did we ever follow up and do an evaluation, or did anyone pay any attention?
Why would they?
Of course we didn't. We spent the money, we moved on. That's all we ever did. None of it was evaluated. And then we were doing community events where we would turn up outside, mainly supermarkets on Saturday afternoons with the police, big van, a stall, hand out some of this free stuff and talk to people about crime. I bought into all this 20 years ago. I look back now and go, what a waste of money and time. But I bought into it. So I thought, right, if we've got the police vans there, let's put a big banner on the side of the police vans about who we are, what we're doing, or crime prevention messages. So I went on the council internal website. I need to buy some banners. Here's some ones, 60 quid each. Let's get 2 of them. Oh, what's that? Magnetic banners. So instead of having to tie them on the van, we could just stick them on the side, huge ones, £600 each. So 10 times as expensive. Not our money, I bought 2. Turned up a week later. We had an event at a supermarket. I got there, police van there, unrolled it. I mean, it was like 8 foot by 5 foot.
So it's
big,
heavy.
Heavy. Stuck on the side of the van. Guess what?
Fell off.
Yeah, straight away. Wouldn't even stick on.
Right.
Tried it again, fell off. Tried it again, fell off. This one must be faulty. Next week we had another one. Took the other banner, same thing.
Oh,
fell
right.
off.
So now it's 1,200.
Yeah, I bought two. Yeah,
Oh, right. Oh, right. So
I bought
now it's
two.
2,400.
yeah.
Okay.
So I emailed our internal department who bought them off, but they've got subcontractors outside, and said these are rubbish, don't stick. The picture on the internet had them stuck on the side of a van. I'm trying to stick these on the side of a van. Oh, we'll get back to you. Got back to us. Or the manufacturers say they're not really good for sticking on the side of vans because they're not a completely flat surface.
Oh.
They have to be on completely. Well, that's not what the picture advertise. Oh yeah, there's nothing we can do. So they went in the bin. £1,200 of magnetic banners that didn't work and didn't do what they said they would do. No returns procedure, went in the bin.
Well, it's not their money. It's just not their money. Why would they care?
Funny money. That's all we ever called it, was funny money.
I hate local councils. I hate central government. I hate all the services. I just sorry, carry on.
My last one, my favourite example would be when we were looking at reducing bicycle thefts in Manchester.
Oh, yeah.
So 20 years ago, with new Labour government, they dictated what crimes were priority. They named 10 crimes. Some you can understand, burglary, things like that. But also sheds, breaking into sheds was a priority.
Yeah, okay.
Also, bike thefts was a priority.
Okay.
So I was asked, and my team was asked, right, you need to look at bike thefts. What can we do differently? So we started handing out cheap pound bike locks to kids at fun fairs and in schools and things like that. Did the work? We don't know. We never followed up. No. And then for the students...
But I mean, on the plus side, at least that's something that looks common sense, like it'll have the potential to reduce the number of thefts.
Exactly. So the thing we needed...
I don't actually hate that.
The thing we needed to follow up was, did anybody ever use them?
Yeah, but...
That's what we should have followed up
The best
on.
you can do is at least give them the lock, you know.
Yeah. And then we started buying £20 locks, really expensive ones for students because they had expensive bikes and they were being ripped off all the time.
Yeah.
And then somebody looked on the TV or the internet and found this company who was doing something special. It was, they could chip your bicycle.
Right, like a dog.
Like a dog and a cat.
Yeah.
So there's a specific chip in it.
Okay.
You then go online, register your name, your address, your telephone number, and if it's ever stolen or found, the police can scan it and go, we know who owns this. And part of the problem the police said to us was, sometimes we stop someone who's a known criminal on a nice bike. Who's the bike? Oh, it's mine. And it's like, we can't prove, we know he's nicked it.
Yeah.
We can't prove he's nicked it.
Yeah.
And we have to let him go with it.
Yeah.
Where this could help us with that.
Yep.
So the kits came and they were like £7 for a little torpedo. You pushed it into the frame of the bike. It had backward spikes, so you could never get that out again.
Right.
And then we needed to buy some scanners, handheld scanners, to scan the bike.
Right.
And I believe we bought 2 of these scanners. They were expensive, 100 quid each or something.
Yeah.
But the torpedoes were 7 quid.
Right.
I know we did thousands of these over several years. I left the council.
I mean, to be honest with you, this sounds like a fairly good plan.
Not finished yet.
I know.
We've not got to the incompetence part yet.
Like, so far, okay, this is a good idea.
And that's why we did it. We thought, this sounds really, really good. You know, there's longevity in it.
Yep.
So if I bought your bike, I could go online and then change the owner's details.
Yeah.
I'm now the owner. There was longevity in this.
Yeah.
So I left the council, sat Charity Shop looking to get crime and disorder, as everybody knows. And then one day I was at a meeting and there was a police inspector there for an area in Manchester. And he was saying, I've got to get back. We're being hammered with bike thefts. I'm going to have to get some officers dedicated to sorting it. I went, how's the chipping program going? Did that work out? Did we arrest what chipping program? But he was new in post. I said,
okay, fair.
You need to go to your bosses up, ask people. This is what we did at the council several years ago, and I think it's still going on. But he went, that's fantastic. No one's told me about that. So I thought, done my good deed there.
Yeah.
Bumped into him several months later. Did you check that out? How did that go? He went, no, Nick, it isn't what you think. Well, what do you mean? We did it. I did hundreds myself. Yeah, I went back and asked about it. So what happened is the council did this, gave us 2 scanners, But we've got 14 policing areas and 14 stations in Greater Manchester. So we couldn't give a scanner to each section. So we stored them at head office, which means if anybody wants to check a bike, they've got to put a bike in the back of a van, drive to corporate headquarters, find a scanner, and then scan it. And obviously our police officer, far too busy, would never do that. And according to our records, no bike's ever been scanned. And I went, "You're kidding me?" But Nick, it's worse. I've inquired where the scanners are, and we've now lost them.
Oh, God. I'm just so tired. What? If you've got 14 districts, why don't you have 14 scanners?
Yeah. Grand scheme of things,
it's
£100
only £100 a scanner. Yeah. And you would have actually done what you meant set out to do, but instead you spent probably thousands of pounds on these bikes that achieve nothing.
And don't forget, this went on for years, this project.
Yeah.
No one ever did an evaluation. No one ever said to the police, "This year, can you give us how many people did you arrest because of this project?" That'd be nice to feed back to the Home Office.
Yeah.
It might have been 8 or 1. At least
it was shown it was
but no one ever went back to evaluate the project. We just spent money and then moved on. The reason why we moved on, we had more money to spend. Money just doesn't spend itself, Carl.
That's a good point.
You've got to spend time working out how you spend this money.
It's a lot of work spending other people's money.
So the reason why we have this incompetence and this waste of taxpayers' money, let me be clear, this is called taxpayers' money. The reason why we have
tax, that's you.
Yeah. And that's because no one is ever held accountable. Yeah. So council budgets are renewed every year. They're not based on performance. They're not based on results. They're based on, our budget's renewed. Yeah. We call it budgets. We never called it taxpayers' money. No one ever in the council ever referred to anything as taxpayers' money. And that is part of the problem, because those budgets reappear the first or 4th of April every single year. And as long as you're not committing fraud, no one cares.
I would much rather a low level of fraud and a much smaller budget.
Yeah.
That would be much more preferable.
But councils don't want fraud because that attracts negative press attention. We're dealing with politicians, and it's anything to avoid negative publicity. Yeah. Have I depressed you now? Because we hear these stories all the time. Yeah. But it's never from someone who can go into the detail and talk about who was there.
But the thing about this is it's just, there's nothing I can do about it, right? And so I'm just sat here like, I just have to know this goes on. Just wasteful, just parasites in local government, wasting my money that I work so hard to bloody earn. And I just find it infuriating. Like, this strengthens the libertarian case against government. That's all I'm saying.
If you go back to 2011, when austerity kicked in, every council in the country budget was slashed. Good. Manchester lost something like 55% of its budget over 2-3 years. His budget was halved. Good. And not enough. And apart from slightly dirty streets in Manchester, you cannot tell the difference.
Yeah. One of the things we got our Swindon council budget through to see how it's being spent. 80% of our council tax goes on services, like social services. So it's giving money to people, and it's just great.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast The Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content that's on the site, such as Contemplation Series, this episode on whether or not freedom is even possible. If you'd like to find out what else is being put out, you can follow on Getter at lotuseaters_com on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.